Hello, hello. I am looking crazy in that thumbnail because I didn't expect to get on to read today. I have these 3-day weekends that I think are going to end in January, but so I always try and use those 3-day weekends to work on projects. So I started a big house project this weekend, and if you had seen me an hour ago, in fact, I almost got on just as I was. I had white paint on the tip of my nose. I had white paint on the tip of my chin. You can still see white paint on my hands. I had been covered in sweat and grime, homeowner project warrior. Yay, weekend warrior, they say. So I thought, oh, there's no way I'm going to get to read today. But I'm showered, I'm clean. Most of the white paint is scrubbed off. And let's read Pride and Prejudice. This goes to tell you, those of you that have been reading with me multiple books, you can pretty quickly figure out which books I'm enjoying and which books I'm not, because A, I'll say it, oh, I hate this book, but B, I get on and I read when I enjoy the book. I kept procrastinating with In the Time of the Butterflies. Hey, Farid. In the Time of the Butterflies, I ended up procrastinating a lot. It took me forever to finish In the Mountains Echo. I've never finished. Oh shoot, I don't remember. It's Witness. No, it's not Witness. It's about a young boy who witnesses a murder. How have you been watching? I've been watching you since I was 6, Mr. Razor Hyper. How is that possible? I've only been doing this since maybe 4 years. So, I guess you're 10, but tell me why. What book got you listening to it? I love hearing that. That's exciting, but I want to know more. You've got to tell me more. Hey, Grace. Really, I'm going to read, but text me either to come over to Discord and join us over there. Merritt Wilson. Well, thank you. I love you too, Merritt, just because you love me. So, oh, that's so funny. What was the first book that you would have listened to? That would have been back with my first book was A Gathering of Old Men, which I can't imagine was great for a 6-year-old. Grace, have I read The Glass Castle? No, I have not. But now I like to hear a list of things. Right now, I've had people asking me for new books, but I've got to finish this one. And then I've promised to read Animal Farm, and then we'll see where we go. I really want to do A Tale of Two Cities. I'm telling you, more of y'all need to get out there and start doing the same thing, because there's no way I can keep up with all these books. There's so many books out there that people want read, and so many books that need to be read. I will look at it at my library for my own individual read. And on Discord, we have something called, Siddhartha or Grace, not you, Grace B, needs to be here, because it's Sprint Read or something like that, where people get on and they partner up with somebody, and they say, hey, you want to read? And they read for 30 minutes at a time. That just gives you some, companionship. Sissy, hello back from Louisiana. I'm in Baton Rouge. Hey, neighbor. Well, hey, neighbor. All right, so 4 minutes in, let's get to it. Let's read. Let's see what is happening with Mr. Collins and with Mr. Wickham and all the others. Let's read. I've got to defrost my glasses because they were on my wet hair. So let's see. Mr. Razor Hyper, write to me on, I don't know if your mom lets you write on Instagram, but I really want to hear your story, or tell your mom to write to me. All right. This is page 121, chapter 23 in the Everyman's Library edition. It was from Barnes & Noble, hardback. Elizabeth was sitting with her mother and sisters, reflecting what she had heard and doubting whether she were authorized to mention it. when Sir William Lucas himself appeared, sent by his daughter to announce her engagement to the family. So this is, yeah, a big deal. With many compliments to them and much self-gratulation on the prospect of a connection between the houses, he unfolded the matter to an audience not merely wondering, but incredulous. For Mrs. Bennet, with more perseverance than politeness, protested he must be entirely mistaken. And Lydia, always unguarded and often uncivil, boisterously exclaimed, "Good Lord, Sir William, how can you tell such a story? Do you not know that Mr. Collins wants to marry Lizzie?" So they're all, oh, my kids gave me this new light ring, so it's brighter, but I see it in my glasses, and that's annoying. So what's happening is the Bennets were sure that Mr. Collins was a done deal and that he was definitely going to marry, if not Lizzie, one of the girls. And so Miss Bennet, and they have no tact. They're just like, "No, Mr. Lucas, you're wrong. There's no way." Just kind of tacky and rude. So nothing less than the complacence of a courtier could have borne without anger such treatment, but Sir William's good breeding carried him through it all, and though he begged leave to be positive as to the truth of his information, he listened to all their impertinence with the most forbearing courtesy. So this reference from the author, if you're quoting the differences in classes, that would be a reference where she's saying, because Sir William is part of the nobility, his breeding, his manners are better than the Bennets, who are crass and very middle class. Elizabeth, feeling it incumbent on her to relieve him from so unpleasant a situation, now put herself forward to confirm his account by mentioning her prior knowledge of it from Charlotte herself, and endeavored to put a stop to the exclamations of her mother and sisters by the earnestness of her congratulations to Sir William, in which she was readily joined by Jane, and by making a variety of remarks on the happiness that might be expected from the match, the excellent character of Mr. Collins, and the convenient distance of Hunsford from London. Mrs. Bennet was in fact too much overpowered to say a great deal, while Sir William remained, but no sooner had he left them than her feelings found a rapid vent. So, she got to gossip. "Oh, Daoud Bilal, thank you so much, and good luck to you. God bless you." So, guys, I don't know what to do when people come on and they just want to harass me and say rude things. But thankfully, there's an edit, so you guys don't have to see it. But I think when someone comes on and is rude, then I want to just, yeah, Dowd, I don't want to live in that world. That's the kind of humor I don't think is funny. So, thank you. I'm glad you cleared that up. And I wish everything good for you. But I've had enough in my country of rude, obnoxious insults. So if you don't want to listen, don't listen. And if you need attention, just say hi and I'll say hi back, you know? But thanks. Thanks for the apology. In the first place, she persisted in disbelieving the whole of the matter. Secondly, she was very sure that Mr. Collins had been taken in. Conned. Thirdly, she trusted that they would never be happy together. And fourthly, that the match might be broken off. Two inferences, however, were plainly deduced from the whole. One, that Elizabeth was the real cause of all the mischief, and the other, that she herself had been barbarously used by them all. And on these 2 points she principally dwelt during the rest of the day. Nothing could console and nothing appease her. Nor did that day wear out her resentment. A week elapsed before she could see Elizabeth without scolding her. A month passed away before she could speak to Sir William or Lady Lucas without being rude. And many months were gone before she could at all forgive their daughter. Mr. Bennet's emotions were much more tranquil on the occasion, and such as he did experience he pronounced to be of a most agreeable sort, for it gratified him, he said, to discover that Charlotte Lucas, whom he had been used to think tolerably sensible, was as foolish as his wife, and more foolish than his daughter. Jane confessed herself a little surprised at the match, but she said less of her astonishment than of her earnest desire for their happiness. Nor could Elizabeth persuade her to consider it as improbable. Kitty and Lydia were far from envying Miss Lucas, for Mr. Collins was only a clergyman, and it affected them in no other way than as a piece of news to spread at Meryton. Lady Lucas could not be insensible of triumph on being able to retort on Miss Bennet the comfort of having a daughter well married, and she called at Longbourn rather oftener than usual to say how happy she was, though Mrs. Bennet's sour looks and ill-natured remarks might have been enough to drive happiness away. Between Elizabeth and Charlotte there was a restraint which kept them mutually silent on the subject, and Elizabeth felt persuaded that no real confidence could ever subsist between them again. Her disappointment in Charlotte made her turn with fonder regard to her sister, of whose rectitude and delicacy she was sure her opinion could never be shaken, and for whose happiness she grew daily more anxious, as Bingley had now been gone a week, and nothing was heard of his return. Jane had sent Caroline an early answer to her letter, and was counting the days till she might reasonably hope to hear again. The promised letter of thanks from Mr. Collins arrived on Tuesday, addressed to their father, and written with all the solemnity of gratitude with the 12 months' abode in the family might have prompted. Mr. Collins has written. After discharging his conscience on that head, he proceeded to inform them with many rapturous expressions of his happiness in having obtained the affection of their amiable neighbor, Miss Lucas, and then explained, "Hey, Siddharth, I wondered if you were there. Caleb, hello from Maine. Just finished watching your, and then there were not videos. Did you figure it out? No spoilers here, though, but did you figure it out? And Karina, wanted to thank you for making all these videos. Karina, I'm so glad to hear that. That's why I do it. That's why I keep doing it. I used to do it for my classroom, but now that I don't teach anymore, I do it because I get a lot of people telling me it helps them. And one of the people that came on earlier said he started reading along at 6, which I'm amazed by. I know. Even after I'd read it the first time, I went back to teach it the second time. I had forgotten who did it, and the complexity of it, like trying to figure it all out, is. I like the very ending where it explains everything because you have to really figure it. It says there's a message held for review. Yeah, Siddharth. He was playing and just said something rude, and obviously it had bad words in it, so it got held for review. But then he apologized. So. That's what young people do sometimes. Siddharth, I thought about something we needed to do on our channel. Oh, I want to have the live read. We need to figure out when, like just have it on the general Discord. And I'd like to schedule like a live chat and see if people will come in and chat like we do here. But this way it could be a verbal chat. So pardon all my painting. I give reference to it at the beginning. So, Mr. Bennet's emotions. No, I read that. Between Elizabeth, no, I read that. Sorry, I lost my place. Jane had sent Caroline an early answer to her letter and was counting the days till she might reasonably hope to hear again. The promised letter of thanks for Mr. Collins, I read that. After discharging his conscience, I read that. I lost my train of thought, sorry, and then explained that it was merely with the view of enjoying her society that he had been so ready to close with their kind wish of seeing him again at Longbourn, whether he hoped to be able to return on Monday fortnight for Lady Catherine, he added, so heartily approved his marriage that she wished it to take place as soon as possible, which he trusted would be an unanswerable argument with his amiable Charlotte, to name an early day for making him the happiest of men. Mr. Collins' return into Hertfordshire was no longer a matter of pleasure to Mrs. Bennet. On the contrary, she was as much disposed to complain of it as her husband. It was very strange that he should come to Longbourn instead of Lucas Lodge. It was also very inconvenient and exceedingly troublesome. She hated having visitors in the house while her health was so indifferent, and lovers were of all people the most disagreeable. Such were the gentle murmurs of Mrs. Bennet, and they gave way only to the greater distress of Mr. Bingley's continued absence. Neither Jane nor Elizabeth were comfortable on this subject. Day after day passed away without bringing any other tidings of him than the report which shortly prevailed in Meryton of his coming no more to Netherfield the whole winter. A report which highly incensed Mrs. Bennet, and which she never failed to contradict as a most scandalous falsehood. She just can't accept it. Even Elizabeth began to fear, not that Bingley was indifferent, but that his sisters would be successful in keeping him away. Unwilling as she was to admit, but why hasn't he written? Unwilling as he was to admit an idea so destructive of Jane's happiness and so dishonorable to the stability of her lover, she could not prevent its frequently recurring. The united efforts of his two unfeeling sisters and of his overpowering friend, assisted by the attractions of Miss Darcy and the amusements of London, might be too much, she feared, for the strength of his attachment. As for Jane, her anxiety under this suspense was, of course, more painful than Elizabeth's, but whatever she felt, she was desirous of concealing, and between herself and Elizabeth, therefore, the subject was never alluded to. But as no such delicacy restrained her mother, an hour seldom passed in which she did not talk of Bingley, express her impatience with his arrival, or even require Jane to confess that if he did not come back, she should think herself very ill-used. It needed all Jane's steady mildness to bear these attacks with tolerable tranquillity. So Jane's struggling enough with her own heartbreak, and her mother just riles it up. Mr. Collins returned most punctually on the Monday fortnight, but his reception at Longbourn was not quite so gracious as it had been on his first introduction. He was too happy, however, to need much attention, and luckily for the others, the business of lovemaking. Now, when they talk about that in this time period, we don't mean sexual lovemaking. It's like the talking and flirting and falling in love, the making of the love, like the making of the relationship of lovemaking relieved him from a great deal of his company. The chief of every day was spent by him at Lucas Lodge, so most of his day was at Lucas Lodge, and sometimes returned to Longbourn only in time to make an apology for his absence before the family went to bed. Hi, Dinah. My next book will be Animal Farm. It'll be a shorter one, and I don't know that it's good to read along live, because if you really want to know the story, you have to wait until I can get online again. But if you catch it once I've already got the recordings done, then you can kind of binge watch it the way you want to. Does that make sense? Siddharth, you could weigh in on that because you join me for a lot of live reads. So I'm just curious, does it matter if you do it live or not? Dinah, I am the most scattered person. I would say on average, I get in 3 readings a week, and there's no rhyme or reason when it's going to be. So typically it's in the evenings, like 5-ish or so when I get home from work. But really, I am not a person of discipline or routine. So I follow YouTubers, and there are a lot of YouTubers that they post like every Sunday, and it's clockwork. You know it's coming. That's not me. I'm sorry. You're welcome. No problem. Mrs. Bennet was really in a most pitiable state. The very mention of anything concerning the match threw her into an agony of ill humor, and wherever she went, she was sure of hearing it talked of. The sight of Miss Lucas was odious to her. As her successor in that house, she regarded her with jealous abhorrence. So, this is her home, and it's going to go to Mr. Collins. So it's going to become the Lucas's property. And so she feels resentful and jealous of that. Whenever Charlotte came to see them, she concluded her to be anticipating the hour of possession, and whenever she spoke in a low voice to Mr. Collins, was convinced that they were talking of the Longbourn estate, and resolving to turn herself and her daughters out of the house as soon as Mr. Bennet was dead. She complained bitterly of all this to her husband. "Indeed, Mr. Bennet," said she, "it is very hard to think that Charlotte Lucas should ever be mistress of this house, that I should be forced to make way for her, and live to see her take my place in it. My dear, do not give way to gloomy thoughts. Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I may be the survivor." Hey, look at it a different way. He's saying, maybe I'll die after you. You'll die, wife, before you, then I, and then you don't get kicked out of your house. He cracks me up. "Indeed, Mr. Bennet," said she, "it is very hard to think that Charlotte Lucas should ever be mistress of this house, that I should be forced." Oh, he said, I read out of order. This was not very consoling to Mrs. Bennet, and therefore, instead of making any answer, she went on as before. "I cannot bear to think that they should have all this estate. If it was not for the entail, I should not mind it." "What should not you mind?" "I should not mind anything at all. Let us be thankful that you are preserved from a state of such insensibility." "I never can be thankful, Mr. Bennet, for anything about the entail. How anyone could have the conscience to entail away an estate from one's own daughters, I cannot understand. And all for the sake of Mr. Collins, too. Why should he have it more than anybody else?" "I leave it to yourself to determine," said Mr. Bennet. And that's the end of the chapter. All right, we're at 21 minutes. And let's see how long. Oh, well, the next chapter is not long. So let's just go ahead and do 2 chapters. So chapter 24 on page 126. Miss Bingley's letter arrived and put an end to doubt. The first sentence conveyed the assurance of their being settled in London for the winter, and concluded with her brother's regret at not having had time to pay his respects to his friend at Hertfordshire before he left the country. Hope was over, entirely over. And when Jane could attest to the rest of the letter, she found little except the professed affection of the writer that could give her any comfort. Miss Darcy's praise occupied the chief of it. Her many attractions were again dwelt on, and Caroline boasted joyfully of their increasing intimacy, and ventured to predict the accomplishment of the wishes which had been unfolded in her former letter. So she thinks they're going to marry. She wrote also with great pleasure of her brother's being an inmate of Mr. Darcy's house, and mentioned with rapture some plans of the latter with regard to new furniture. Elizabeth, to whom Jane very soon communicated the chief of all this, heard it in silent indignation. Her heart was divided between concern for her sister and resentment against all the others. To Caroline's assertion of her brother's being partial to Miss Darcy, she paid no credit. That he was really fond of Jane, she doubted no more than she had ever done. And much as she had always been disposed to like him, she could not think without anger, hardly without contempt, on that easiness of temper, that want of proper resolution, which now made him the slave of his designing friends. She's lost respect for Bingley because he's so easily manipulated by his sisters, and led him to sacrifice his own happiness to the caprice, the whims of their inclinations. Had his own happiness, however, been the only sacrifice, he might have been allowed to sport with it in whatever manner he thought best, but her sister's was involved in it, as she thought he must be sensible himself. It was a subject, in short, on which reflection would be long indulged, and must be unavailing. She could think of nothing else, and yet whether Bingley's regard had really died away, or were suppressed by his friend's interference, whether he had been aware of Jane's attachment, or whether it had escaped his observation, whichever were the case, though her opinion of him must be materially affected by the difference, her sister's situation remained the same, her peace equally wounded. A day or two passed before Jane had courage to speak of her feelings to Elizabeth, but at last, on Mrs. Bennet's leaving them together, after a longer irritation than usual about Netherfield and its master, she could not help saying, "Oh, that my dear mother had more command over herself. She can have no idea of the pain she gives me by her continual reflections on him. I will not repine. It cannot last long. He will be forgot, and we shall all be as we were before. I'm not gonna think about him too much. I'm gonna get over this. I just wish my mom would be quiet." Aisha, Invisible Man. I've had a couple people ask me to read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And unfortunately, I've already planned and committed to reading Animal Farm next. And I don't know when I would be able to get to Invisible Man. So if you're reading it for school, I really encourage you to find on YouTube, it's probably on YouTube, another reader. And the other thing I keep saying is, Sid, I'm throwing this to you. I think maybe we need some other people to do channels like this because there's so many books out there that need to be read. Um, hey, I don't know how to say you donut on fuel. Uh, Not gonna lie, it was not my favorite. Oh, you read Invisible Man. Donut on G fuel. Thank you for that. I just could not figure that one out. You just finished, and then there were none, or yeah, then there were none. Hey, Venus. Um, Lucinda, you helped me so much last year during COVID. That's really good to hear. Oh, Pride and Prejudice. And it's one of my favorites. Not one of my favorites, but I really like it. We all have different opinions, so that's okay. We all like different things. I don't like video games. Go figure. I don't love anime. I don't hate it, but I don't love anime. So, I mean, we just have different. I like graphic novels, but I don't like. I guess it's not anime I don't like. I don't like the superhuman, like DC Comics and stuff. Oh, that was a night. I had to read that whole thing, Donut. That was really nice of you. I'm sure she loved that. That was a really thoughtful gift. Really, honestly, teachers, like when I taught, I didn't care necessarily about gifts. I really liked to be given things for my classroom, like books or supplies, but anything that made me know, like if somebody came with a cup of coffee for me in the morning, anything they did that just made me feel like, hey, thanks. Thanks for the work you do. Because most teachers really do it because they love to teach. And it's a really hard job. I don't think the average person understands how hard it is to be a good teacher. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad teachers. So yeah, but that was really kind of you, and I'm sure it meant a lot to her. Doesn't mean you get a better grade though. If she's got integrity, it just means she might cut you a break if you're right between a B and an A, or if you're a little late turning something in. But a good teacher shouldn't cut you a break because you gave a gift. Oh, I didn't mean graphic like that, Venus. I mean graphic novel. Um, Good for you, Donut. Would I consider it though, if you mean graphic? No, I don't think so. I think there are some mature themes. And what I've learned as a teacher is books don't necessarily teach kids um, stuff they should know. I think a lot of times references are in there, in you, like the abortion or the attempted abortion in A Thousand Splendid Suns. I think if I don't highlight what was going on, I think the really naive or innocent reader wouldn't get it. So I think to avoid a book because it's graphic now on the murder or on blood or gore, that was in Kite Runner. That was definitely in Kite Runner. That one was a little bit harder for me. I would have been uncomfortable reading Kite Runner in a classroom because you've got some rape scenes in that. Um, but I still, when I've had to read very graphic books, um, when I've had to read, I'm reading the things y'all are saying. When I've had to read graphic books, whether it's gore or racism, I think books with the N word in it are really hard for me to read. And I've evolved over teaching over the years. I used to say, we don't censor anything. This is what the author wanted, and we're going to say everything. But as that issue of social injustice has become, I have a better understanding of it. I've become better educated. I really regret ever having read the N word, even though I didn't say the word. I'm just reading what's there. So there are parts of books that I'm uncomfortable with. And when I would read in class, a lot of times I would say, okay, y'all are going to read this passage on your own, and then I'll come back and read. But I try to give a disclaimer that says I was taught high school, so we need to be able to talk about these things maturely and evaluate them together. So, Time Machine. In answer to you, Donut, I'm reading Animal Farm next. I'd like to do Tale of Two Cities. I'd like to do The Alchemist. So I don't know that I'm going to get to any requests anytime soon, but keep nagging me, and who knows, maybe I will. I did like the Time Machine, though. It's a good one. Well, we're out of sync, Donut. We're just out of sync. What can I do? That one won. Do you ever vote on my polls when I put my polls up? I'm reading it next because that's what won the poll. That's what won the vote. I hope you join me because I haven't read it since I was y'all's age. I'm assuming you're a high schooler. And I'm not sure I'll get all the symbolism. I struggle with that sometimes. That was your summer reading. Ninth, yeah. Finally, I'm live. David, I'm live all the time. Maybe finally you joined my live. Right. I don't know what you mean by that. Animal Farm during the 10th grade. It was really good. A lot of kids really seem to like it. Same with Lord of the Flies. Donut, you go to community, like if you've subscribed, you go to community, I think it's like videos and playlists, and there's something else, and then community. And I put polls up almost every other week so that you can vote about different things that you're interested in. It helps me know better what you guys are interested in and what you like and what you're doing as high schoolers or what your demographic is, that kind of thing. And because I still work as an educator, but I work for the Department of Education now. I like to see what kids are interested in. It gives me a really good sense of demographics. So usually the polls are just things I think you might be interested in, things that I'm curious if you're interested in. So go vote. I don't have a new one up right now. I think the last one is about not Animal Farm, but is there a write-in? Yes. There's always at the bottom. I always say if it's other, make a comment. So I like to hear additional thoughts. All right, let me finish this because now I'm at 32 minutes and I haven't finished this chapter. But I like talking to y'all. Maybe I'll just stop. No. Elizabeth looked at her sister with incredulous solicitude, but said nothing. You doubt me, cried Jane, slightly coloring. Indeed, you have no reason. He may live in my memory as the most amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all. I have nothing either to hope or fear, and nothing to reproach him with. Thank God, I have not that pain. A little time, therefore, I shall certainly try to get the better. With a stronger voice, she soon added, I have this comfort immediately, that it has not been more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself. My dear Jane, exclaimed Elizabeth, you are too good. Your sweetness and disinterestedness are really angelic. I do not know what to say to you. I feel as if I had never done you justice or loved you as you deserved. Miss Bennet eagerly disclaimed all extraordinary merit, and threw back the praise on her sister's warm affection. Nay, said Elizabeth, this is not fair. You wish to think all the world respectable, and are hurt if I speak ill of anybody. I only want to think you perfect, and you set yourself against it. Do not be afraid of my running into any excess, of my encroaching on your privilege of universal goodwill. You need not. There are few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters, and of the little dependence that can be placed on the appearance of either merit or sense. That would be a really good line to annotate, because I think that goes to the heart of the theme and of Jane Austen's point. It starts with the more I see of the world, and it ends with merit or sense. I have met with two instances lately. One I will not mention. The other is Charlotte's marriage. It is unaccountable. In every view, it is unaccountable. My dear Lizzie, let's see, David, what you're going to say. Going to be in Louisiana for Christmas. Oh, yeah, you've got grandparents down here. Um, if I'm going to go to New Orleans, well, maybe we can figure out a meetup. That would be fun. COVID, it just depends on COVID. This woman, I mean, Chloe, that's funny. Whenever y'all say queen, whenever I get that comment, it just makes me laugh. Um, and I really say that you guys own your own. You listen and you absorb and you understand. I'm glad you found a tool. This is just a tool to help you do well in school. And it's so much better than when you guys use Schmoop or Spark Notes and you don't really read the story. So yay you for making the effort. David said just about half a year ago, I was trying to finish A Thousand Splendid Suns. It was hard since I only had 3 days into, oh my gosh, to read that book, and tried to look for someone who read along, and I found you. Yay. If it weren't for those readings, I would have easily failed. Well, good for you for sticking it out. Thank you both very much. And I'm glad you're doing well in school. That means the most to me because I truly, truly, truly believe in education. And I want everybody to have a shot at education. So if this is a tool that's helping people, makes me happy. Makes me happy. Keep following. Follow me on Instagram if you want, or join Discord. Discord, we live chat. Instagram, you can see that I was out painting my house today and working on rotten wood. You kind of see the little history of my granddaughter. It's not anything very much about literature. It's more about me. So if you're interested in knowing my stupid, boring little old lady life, it's there on Instagram. But if you want more talk to other peers who are interested in literature, that's Discord. And we help each other there a lot. We encourage each other there a lot. So see which one works better for you or join both. My dear Lizzie, do not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness. You do not make allowance enough for difference of situation and temper. Consider Mr. Collins' respectability and Charlotte's prudent, steady character. Remember that she is one of a large family, that as to fortune, it is a most eligible match, and be ready to believe for everybody's sake that she may feel something like regard and esteem for our cousin. To oblige you, I would try to believe almost anything, but no one else could be benefited by such a belief as this. For were I persuaded that Charlotte had any regard for him, I should only think worse of her understanding than I do now of her heart. My dear Jane, Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man. You know he is as well as I do, and you must feel as well as I do that the woman who marries him cannot have a proper way of thinking. You shall not defend her, though it is Charlotte Lucas. You shall not, for the sake of one individual, change the meaning of principle and integrity, nor endeavor to persuade yourself or me that selfishness is prudence and insensibility of danger security for happiness. A lot of interesting thought there. It would make a really good thesis statement to talk about who is right, Elizabeth or Jane. Jane sees the good in all people and can rationalize every decision, and really there is somebody for everybody, or maybe not necessarily somebody for everybody, but just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean that person doesn't have value to someone else. So I think in terms of a really strong thesis statement, Jane or Elizabeth summing up or representing the thoughts of the day and who you think makes the better argument. It's an interesting point. I must think your language too strong in speaking of both, replied Jane, and I hope you will be convinced of it by seeing them happy together. But enough of this. You alluded to something else. You mentioned 2 instances. I cannot misunderstand you, but I entreat you, dear Lizzie, not to pain me by thinking that person to blame and saying your opinion of him is sunk. We must not be so ready to fancy ourselves intentionally injured. We must not expect a lively young man to be always so guarded and circumspect. It is very often nothing but our own vanity that deceives us. Women fancy admiration means more than it does. Women fancy admiration means, women think admiration means more than it does. Just because he was kind to me and polite to me, women tend to read more into it than there is there. Did you notice how I really struggled with that? Like I couldn't make it make sense. And in the last reading, I said, if it doesn't just move on, but that sentence just, I couldn't get my head around it, so I couldn't move on. So sometimes you do have to sit and struggle with it and change a word, replace the word. So it's just the way they use fancy. It had a different meaning to us in this day. And men take care that they should. If it is designedly done, that cannot be justified. But I have no idea of there being so much design in the world as some persons imagine. I am far from attributing any part of Mr. Bingley's conduct to design, said Elizabeth, but without scheming to do wrong or to make others unhappy, there may be error and there may be misery. Thoughtlessness, want of attention to other people's feelings, and want of resolution will do the business. And do you impute it to either of those? Yes, to the last. But if I go on, I shall displease you by saying what I think of persons you esteem. Stop me whilst you can. David, thank you so much. And I'm so glad you made your senior year. So are you a freshman in college now? I know you said you're leaving, so you might not answer that, but I'm just curious. You persist then in supposing his sisters influence him? Yes, in conjunction with his friend. I cannot believe it. Why should they try to influence him? They can only wish his happiness, and if he is attached to me, no other woman can secure it. Your first position is false. They may wish many things besides his happiness. They may wish his increase of wealth and consequence. They may wish him to marry a girl who has all the importance of money, great connections, and pride. Beyond a doubt, they do wish him to choose Miss Darcy, replied Jane, but this may be from better feelings than you are supposing. They have known her much longer than they've known me. No wonder if they love her better. But whatever may be their wishes, it is very likely they should have opposed their brothers. Very unlikely they would have opposed their brothers. What sister would think herself at liberty to do it unless there was something very objectionable? If they believed him attached to me, they would not try to part us. If he were so, they could not succeed. She holds Bingley accountable, and she's mad at herself because she had more feeling for him than she thinks he had for her. By supposing such an affection, you make everybody act unnaturally and wrong, and me most unhappy. Do not distress me by the idea. I'm not ashamed of having been mistaken, or at least it is slight. It is nothing in comparison of what I should feel in thinking ill of him or his sisters. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. Elizabeth could not oppose such a wish, and from this time Mr. Bingley's name was scarcely mentioned between them. Mrs. Bennet still continued to wonder and repine at his returning no more, and though a day seldom passed in which Elizabeth did not account for it clearly, there seemed little chance of her ever considering it with less perplexity. Her daughter endeavored to convince her of what she did not believe herself, that his attentions to Jane had been merely the effect of a common and transient liking, which ceased when he saw her no more. But though the probability of the statement was admitted at the time, she had the same story to repeat every day. Mrs. Bennet's best comfort was that Mr. Bingley must be down again in the summer. Mrs. Bennet holds on to hope. Mr. Bennet treated the matter differently. So, Lizzie, said he one day, your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed in love a little now and then. It is something to think of, and gives her a sort of distinction among her companions. When is your turn to come? You will hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane. Now is your time. Here are officers enough in Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country. Let Wickham be your man. He's a pleasant fellow, and would jilt you creditably. He's so playful, Mr. Bennet. Thank you, sir, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune. True, said Mr. Bennet, but it is a comfort to think that whatever of that kind may befall you, you have an affectionate mother who will always make the most of it. Mr. Wickham's society was of material service in dispelling the gloom which the late perverse occurrences had thrown on many of the Longbourn family. They saw him often, and to his other recommendations was now added that of general unreserve. The whole of what Elizabeth had already heard, his claims on Mr. Darcy, and all that he had suffered from him, was now openly acknowledged and publicly canvassed, and everybody was pleased to think how much they had always disliked Mr. Darcy before they had known anything of the matter. Miss Bennet was the only creature who could suppose there might be any extenuating circumstances in the case. Unknown to the Society of Hertfordshire, her mild and steady candor always pleaded for allowances and urged the possibility of mistakes. But by everybody else, Mr. Darcy was condemned as the worst of the men. And that's the end of 23. So we're on page 131. Are we? We're not quite halfway, almost there. So we will keep reading. I enjoyed those of you that visited along with us. Come join us on Discord. We're building that channel, or that, I don't know what it's called, but it's fun to hear the ideas exchanged and team up with people who have interest in literature and academics. And you don't find that everywhere. If you were like me in high school, I was very involved in theater, but I didn't have a tight circle of friends. I wasn't the cool kid. Big surprise, right? And that's not to say just because you're a reader, you're not the cool kid. But it's been my experience that typically those of us that were very academic didn't always, lead the cheer of all the interests of the school. So with the World Wide Web, we open up a much bigger opportunity of getting to know people. So if that's something that you're interested in and you just want to find some more like-minded people, Discord's a great place to come. I look forward to chatting with you there. We are at 10,200 subscribers, I think. And thanks to Donut, I need to add a new discussion, a new question. Can I have a shout out? SKO fanboy. Is that a shout out? Does that count? SKO fanboy or SKO fanboy. I don't know which one, y'all. I don't know these names. I'm sorry. My daughter dressed up as some anime character, and even she told me the name. I don't know who it was. I just don't know. Does that give me a subscription, fanboy, if I shout it out to you? So I am glad you guys. Oh, Manoj, I didn't see you there. Hello. I'm well. How are you? It's been a while. Manoj, you should come over to Discord and visit with us. Those of you, SKO fanboy took away his shout out. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't do it righto. So if you haven't subscribed, think about doing it. When you ring the bell, then you get notified when I go live. And as people ask, do I go live on a set schedule? I don't. So it kind of gives you a little notice that I'm there if you care. And tell your friends, tell your teachers, keep reading, read your own books, and I will read to you next time. See ya.